I stood just outside the sitting room, my hands gripping the edges of the silver tea tray, so tightly my knuckles turned white. The delicate porcelain cups rattled against the saucers, betraying the tremor I could no longer hide. Let us just make sure she walks away with nothing. That voice Erica's cut through the air like a blade, and for a moment, I forgot to breathe. I pressed my back to the wall, heart pounding, as my mother-in-law Elise's soft laughter followed. "Oh, Erica, you are terrible," she giggled, but there was no disapproval in her voice. Only amusement. Amusement at my expense. I had spent the last 3 years trying to be the perfect daughter-in-law, polite, helpful, eager to please. And here they were mocking me like I was a disposable placeholder in Wesley's life. We cannot let 20 years of building this family's reputation go to someone who could just leave. Erica continued, as if I were a gold digger who had conned my way into their perfect world. Never mind that I had stood beside Wesley through job losses, health scares, and 2 failed IVF cycles. Never mind that I had sacrificed my own career ambitions to support his. Apparently, none of that mattered. I was not one of them. And now they were rewriting the future, as if I had never been here at all. My legs felt weak, but I remained frozen in place, listening as they planned my financial destruction over tea and shortbread cookies, like it was Sunday brunch. Erica called me this one like I was a passing trend, a problem to be solved. "What does she even make 40,000 a year? It is embarrassing," she sneered. I bit my lips so hard it bled. I thought about every snide comment, every backhanded compliment, every time Elise had asked about my little job, with her condescending smile. The red flags had been there since our wedding, when Erica pulled Wesley away during our first dance for family business. And like a fool, I had smiled through it all, too blinded by love to see the knife coming. But now I saw it clearly. And I knew something they did not. They had betrayed the wrong woman. The moment I walked back into that room, balancing the tray like nothing had happened, I felt changed. Not outwardly, I still wore the same soft smile, the same sensible blouse Erica had once mocked for being more church picnic than chic. But something in me had shifted. I set the cups down with precision, meeting Elise's eyes for a beat longer than necessary. She blinked and looked away. Erica did not even glance up. She was too busy swirling her tea and discussing her charity gala, her voice syrupy and sharp all at once. I nodded politely, excused myself, and made it to the guest bathroom before the tears came. Not loud sobs, just quiet, seething betrayal leaking out of my eyes. I stared at my reflection, the corners of my lips trembling. "She walks away with nothing." The words haunted me, not just because they were cruel, but because they were so casually spoken, as if my erasure was inevitable. That night, I could not sleep. I lay beside Wesley, who snored peacefully, blissfully, unaware that his wife had been reduced to a footnote in his family's legacy. I watched the way his brow creased even in sleep, and I tried to remember when he had last looked at me like I mattered. It had been months, maybe longer. Conversations had become transactions. Affection rare. And always, Erica hovered like a shadow, her voice echoing in our lives. "You could do better. She just does not get us. You need someone who understands legacy." I had laughed it off, defended him, blamed stress. But now the puzzle was complete. He had let them rewrite our future, and I had been too trusting to notice. The next morning, I poured his coffee and asked if something ever happened to us, what would I get? He looked up startled, then smiled like I had asked about the weather. "Why would you even ask that?" I just shrugged, but I knew then he would never admit it. Not yet. The papers were already signed. The betrayal complete. I did not rage. I researched. I went through our wedding photos, zooming in on Erica, pulling Wesley away during our first dance, whispering something into his ear. I remembered the gift she gave us, a prenuptial review just in case. I had been blind, yes, but now I was wide awake. And the more I reviewed, the more I saw her fingerprints everywhere. My job mocked, my traditions dismissed. Even our IVF decisions had been rerouted under her suggestions. They had underestimated me. They thought I was fragile because I stayed silent. But silence is not weakness. It is preparation. If this betrayal made you furious, comment below how you would react and do not forget to subscribe for more stories like this. The day the legal betrayal was confirmed, it came wrapped in polite conversation and sealed with false concern. Wesley had just come home from a quick lunch with Erica, and I could smell the expensive cologne he only wore for her events, not ours. He sat across from me at the kitchen island, his smile practiced and patient. Layla, I've been thinking about how we handle our assets, he began, as if this was just a responsible adult conversation, not a knife aimed at my future. Erica helped me look over some documents. It's just a small update to the will, nothing serious, just standard procedure, really. My fork froze midair. I asked gently, "What sort of update?" He blinked, then reached into his briefcase and slid over a manila envelope. Inside were papers I had never seen before, legal jargon about trusts, beneficiaries, clauses that I could barely pronounce, all wrapped in one glaring truth: I had been replaced. Wesley did not ask me to sign anything because I already had months ago. A revised marital trust slipped into a stack of paperwork I thought was related to refinancing the house. He had buried it in a dozen other forms, and I had trusted him. I remember the afternoon clearly now. He brought me tea, told me to relax, while we took care of boring adult stuff. I signed distracted and tired after work. He had already notarized the signatures. My initials were there. And just like that, I had agreed to a plan that would leave me with nothing if we ever separated. Wesley watched me read, sipping his drink, acting as if this was normal, even considerate. "It's just for protection," he explained. "You know how messy things can get." Erica insisted this was the cleanest way to safeguard the family estate. The way he said her name made my stomach turn. I wanted to scream, to throw the papers across the room. Instead, I smiled. I nodded. I pretended I understood, because if Erica had taught me anything, it was this: power lies in patience. I made copies of everything the moment Wesley left the house. I scanned every page, saved it to a cloud account under a fake name, printed backup copies, and tucked them inside my old marketing portfolio where I knew he would never look. Then I began documenting calls, conversations, comments made during family dinners. I turned my phone into a recorder, my laptop into a vault. I no longer trusted anyone, and I did not need to. The betrayal was no longer just emotional, it was legal, and I would fight it on their terms, with evidence, with strategy, and with a calmness that would terrify them. What they took from me was not love. It was safety, dignity, and the belief that I was part of the family. And I would take something greater in return, the truth they buried so deeply it would destroy them when it surfaced. I should have seen it coming sooner. The whispers, the shifting glances, the way Wesley flinched every time I brought up our future, as if I were intruding on a plan I was no longer part of. After copying the documents, I started looking at everything differently. Wesley's laptop became my obsession. He was meticulous, always logging out, always clearing tabs. But one morning, in his usual rush out the door for a meeting with Erica, he left it open. It was subtle, a file buried in a folder labeled Financial Legacy. The name was harmless enough, but when I clicked, I found the digital version of the new will, stamped, signed, and confirmed. The executor, Erica. Beneficiary, Erica. My name removed entirely, except for a small paragraph that essentially read, "Should Layla and Wesley remain legally married at the time of his death, a separate discretionary trust will be reviewed." Reviewed? Not guaranteed. Not secured. Reviewed by Erica. My chest tightened, but I did not cry. I saved it. I printed it. And then I noticed something else, a gallery folder named Legacy Photos. I expected estate pictures, old family events. But there, tucked between vacation snapshots, was something odd, a baby photo labeled Erica Birth Unknown. Another titled Adoption Certificate, Scan. My pulse quickened. Was this what it looked like? I clicked through. More hospital forms, discharge notes, a court document from 1993. I could not believe it. Erica was not biologically related to Garrett Morrison. There it was, clear as day, scanned and buried, but never deleted. Elise had adopted Erica before marrying Garrett. No one ever mentioned it, and they certainly never treated her as anything other than the proud bloodline's jewel. Suddenly it all made sense. Elise's obsession with image, the tight control, the overcompensation, Erica's hyperprotectiveness over the family's name, even when it meant betraying me. I sat there stunned. All these years of being called an outsider when Erica was the one whose place was protected by silence. Not shame secrecy. They had built an empire on a lie. And I realized then that I did not just have a betrayal in my hands. I had leverage, truth, and they had handed it to me. I closed the laptop gently. No confrontation, no warning. That would come later. For now, I added the scanned files to my vault. I had the legal betrayal. I had the personal cruelty. And now, I had the secret that could crack their legacy at its core. I finally understood what power felt like, not yelling, not vengeance, but holding a truth so sharp it could cut through their entire illusion. I would not waste it. I would use it. They thought I would fall apart. But I was not breaking. I was becoming something else entirely dangerous, deliberate, and done, waiting for their permission to exist in a story that should have never belonged to them in the first place. The next time I saw Erica, I smiled. Not the strained, polite smile, she was used to the kind that masked discomfort and tried to smooth over insult, but a quiet, deliberate smile that said, "I know more than you think." She was draped in designer beige, perched on the corner of Elise's velvet couch, sipping wine she did not pay for, and laughing at some joke only she found amusing. I sat across from her during Elise's birthday dinner, and I studied her like a chess opponent. She had no idea the board had changed. That morning, I had stopped at the post office and personally mailed off 5 sleek white boxes, ancestry DNA kits gift-wrapped with gold ribbon, and a custom note. In honor of family legacy, let us celebrate where we come from. One for Elise, one for Erica, one for Wesley, and 2 others for Wesley's cousins, who idolized the Morrison lineage like it was royal blood. I delivered them with poise, making sure to gush about how connected I felt to the Morrison roots. Elise practically teared up. Wesley looked surprised, but pleased already imagining another framed family tree. Erica was the only one whose face faltered for half a second. It was so quick anyone else would have missed it. But I caught it. She held the box like it might burn her. "Oh, how thoughtful," she said, and her eyes flicked to Wesley, searching for a cue. "Did you come up with this yourself? Just something small," I replied. "I thought it would be beautiful to pass down to future generations." She nodded stiffly, and I knew I had her. She would not dare refuse, her pride would not allow it. But something in her knew I was setting something in motion. She just did not know what. At dinner, Elise raised a toast about legacy. Wesley joked about who would end up being part Viking. I laughed along even though my heart beat steadily like a countdown clock. I had registered all the kits myself, ensuring they would all land in the same online account, one that I controlled under a neutral email address. And I paid for the expedited processing because I was done waiting. I watched Erica that night as she told the same story she always did about how Garrett called her his true firstborn, even when she was a toddler. I watched Elise beam at her, never once acknowledging that her real history was locked behind legal papers she had chosen to bury. I sipped my wine, nodded at all the right moments, and reminded myself this is the last time they will speak with such certainty. Because soon the results would arrive. And when they did, the lie they built their legacy on would not just crack, it would collapse. I was not coming for their money anymore. I was coming for their illusion. And nothing terrifies people like Erica more than the truth wrapped in a bow they cannot return. The results came back on a Wednesday, gray skies drizzle on the windows, the kind of day that whispered something was about to shift. I had checked the email every morning for a week. The login burned into my memory. The anticipation curled tight in my stomach. When I saw the subject line, "Your ancestry DNA, results are in," I clicked so fast I almost dropped my phone. I scanned through Wesley's first. Everything aligned. Elise was his mother. Garrett was his father. No surprises. Next, I opened Elise's strong European ancestry, nothing that contradicted what we all knew. But then came Erica's. It was the silence between lines that made the truth scream. No biological link to Garrett. None. Zero shared centimorgans. Her results lit up connections to a woman named Margaret Daniels, age 67, last known address Tampa, Florida. Not a single Morrison connection. Not one. I cross-referenced the ID numbers, double-checked the match percentages, reread the family tree overlays. There was no mistake. Erica was not Garrett's daughter, the firstborn Morrison Jewel A, carefully curated myth. I sat there still as my heart pounded in my ears. I had known. I had suspected. But seeing it confirmed digital and undeniable made something inside me go quiet. They had built an empire on bloodlines, talked about Morrison's strength, like it was sacred. They had erased me from the family narrative to preserve this legacy. And now that legacy was paper thin. I did not feel triumph. Not yet. I felt readiness. I downloaded the results, saved them under 3 encrypted folders, and printed hard copies just in case. I even mailed one to my attorney, sealed with a note, hold for future release. Then I waited for the perfect moment to deliver the truth. It came 3 days later at Garrett and Elise's wedding anniversary party. Elise insisted on hosting it at their estate, the same home where I had once been told to stay out of family photos, because Erica should be centered. Guests poured in, elbows rubbed, champagne flowed, and a slideshow of old photos flickered across a rented projector. I stood quietly by the cake table, holding my clutch close. Inside it, 5 printed ancestry reports, color-highlighted, labeled, and undeniable. When Elise raised her glass to toast the enduring strength of Morrison blood, I stepped forward. "I have a small gift," I said, interrupting politely. Wesley blinked. Erica stiffened. I handed Elise a black envelope and gestured for her to open it. Her smile faltered as she pulled out the papers. She read the first line, then the second, her hands beginning to tremble. "What is this?" she whispered. "It is your family tree," I said calmly. "All of it, including the branches you chose not to tell anyone about." Erica snatched the pages from Elise's grip, scanning them with growing panic. Wesley looked confused, still behind still processing, but Cody, Erica's husband, stood very still. Then he turned to her and said, "Is this true?" Erica said nothing. Elise sat down, ghost pale. And I, for the first time in months, felt power settle in my bones, not loud, not dramatic, but absolute. The silence that followed was surgical cutting, clinical, and deeply satisfying. You could hear the crack of champagne bubbles fizzing in untouched glasses as the air in the room thickened. Elise clutched the papers like they had burned her fingers. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She looked up at Erica with horror, then at Wesley, who was just beginning to comprehend the bomb I had dropped in the middle of their carefully curated legacy celebration. The guests around us had gone quiet, their murmurs fading into stunned silence as the words on those documents began to sink in. Erica, always so poised, so smug, stood there exposed. And Cody, his face said everything. His confusion turned to realization, then betrayal. He did not raise his voice. He did not cause a scene. He simply stepped back, nodded once, and said, "We will talk later, alone." And with that, he walked out of the Morrison estate, and as far as I know, out of Erica's life. Erica tried to recover, stammering about lies and fake science, and how I must have tampered with the results. But the damage was already done. Elise whispered something to her, and slowly stood up, clutching her wineglass like a crutch. "We will end the party early," she told the stunned guests, her voice brittle. People began to collect their coats and avoid eye contact. The legacy they had spent years protecting had just been unraveled in less than 5 minutes, and I had not raised my voice once. In the days that followed, the fallout rippled like aftershocks. Cody moved out of their condo. Elise went dark on social media and stopped attending her weekly charity brunches. The Morrison name was now tied to whispered scandal, inheritance fraud, hidden adoption, family betrayal. Wesley called me 3 times. I did not answer. He sent flowers. I returned them. The last message he left said, "We need to talk." But there was nothing left to say. not when the truth had already spoken louder than either of us ever had. Legally, the will he created was now under question. With Erica's biological link to Garrett disproven, her claim as sole beneficiary and executor was shredded. The lawyers scrambled to contain the damage, but they could not bury DNA. They could not undo what had been revealed. Their airtight legacy was now riddled with holes. As for me, I took quiet satisfaction in watching it all unfold. I was not interested in suing. I did not need their money. What I needed was for the world to know that I had been erased on purpose and that I had returned not to beg, not to cry, but to dismantle the illusion with truth they never saw coming. They played with legal ink. I played with bloodlines. They silenced me with documents. I answered with data they could not refute. The reckoning had arrived, and I was not done. Not yet. After the dust settled, I disappeared, not in shame, not in defeat, but in quiet liberation. While the Morrison estate boiled with hushed panic and reputation triage, I stepped into the slow, deliberate rhythm of starting over. I moved into a modest townhouse on the edge of a small town where no one knew my name. There were no marble countertops or oil portraits here, just sunlight through tall windows, chipped teacups with character and silence that was mine to fill. I opened a flower boutique called Willow and Bloom, tucked between a bakery and a bookshop. The kind of place people wandered into on Saturdays and left with lavender sachets and soft smiles. I built it with my own two hands, no trust funds, no family name on the door, just me, Layla, and a new life rooted in beauty, peace, and intention. It was not about revenge anymore. That had already bloomed and withered in the wake of their scandal. No, this was about reclaiming something they tried to take my narrative. Every bouquet I arranged felt like a small reclamation of voice. Brides who once would have scoffed at my little job now sought me out for custom pieces that made their weddings unforgettable. Mothers brought in daughters to build arrangements together. I hosted community workshops and taught people how to find calm in the chaos of stems and thorns. One crisp morning, as I swept the walkway in front of the shop, I spotted Elise standing across the street. She looked smaller somehow, her perfect curls flattened by the wind, her heels sinking slightly into the uneven pavement. She did not cross over. She just stood there, clutching a scarf to her throat, eyes glassy. Then she mouthed something. "Sorry." That was it. No grand apology, no reparation. Just one word floating through a chilly October breeze. I held her gaze, nodded once, and walked back inside. I did not need more. I had my closure. Wesley never showed up. I heard through a friend of a friend that he moved to Chicago. The Morrison estate had been divided and restructured, the new will tied up in court filings, no longer bearing my name or Erica's. She had faded into silence. Some said she was overseas. Others whispered she had taken her mother's maiden name to escape the stain. But I was still here, blooming, healing, building. And while I never sought recognition, it came anyway. A small magazine wrote a feature on Willow and Bloom. A stranger mailed me a note saying, "You reminded me that silence can be strength." And with each new customer who stepped through my door, unaware of the storm I once walked through, I smiled because I was no longer that woman who stood with a tea tray trembling behind a wall. I was no longer afraid of being erased. I had made something lasting, something true. And this time, no one could take it from me. It took me a long time to fully understand the lesson buried beneath the pain, the lies, and the cold realization that I had once loved people who saw me as disposable. But now, years later, standing beneath the warm glow of Willow and Bloom's overhead lights, watching a young couple laugh as they picked out flowers for their first home together, I finally grasped it. Survival is not just walking away. It is rebuilding from ashes with your name carved into every brick. I had spent years believing I had to earn a seat at someone else's table. What I did not realize was that I had the power to build my own and set the guest list. The Morrisons never reached out again. Wesley's silence was its own confession, one that I no longer needed to confront. I used to dream of revenge, not out of cruelty, but as a form of justice, as a way to reclaim what had been taken from me without my consent. and in some ways I achieved that. But in truth, the real revenge was not in the DNA results, or the scandal, or the looks Elise could not show her face without receiving in her old circles. It was in the quiet, the dignity, the life I created after the storm, one where my peace was non-negotiable. Sometimes I still wonder if they ever sit in that hollow estate and think of me. I wonder if Elise's hand trembles when she walks past the photo wall and sees Erica's smiling face, now a symbol of all that was built on sand. I wonder if Wesley regrets anything, or if he simply buried the truth like he buried me. But then I remind myself I no longer need the answers. The questions belong to them now. What matters is that I did not let their betrayal define me. I let it refine me. These days, I work with survivors women who have been erased, overlooked, or rewritten in someone else's story. I help them plant roots again through flowers, through words, through quiet spaces that say, "You are still here. You still matter." Every scar I carry has become a stepping stone towards something better. And I hope my story reminds you that betrayal may feel like the end, but it can also be a beginning. If someone tries to write you out of your own life, do not beg them to include you. Pick up the pen, start a new chapter. Because your legacy does not begin with them, it begins the moment you choose yourself. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you furious on my behalf, drop a comment below and do not forget to subscribe for more stories of truth betrayal and powerful transformation.